You're listening to Brandon Sports Talk, interviewing professional athletes and Paralympians and Olympians. And now for your professional athlete interview and your host, Brandon P.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege and honor of interviewing the Toronto Argonauts CFL football player, Adam Guillemette. How are you doing today?
Good, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in playing in professional football?
Yeah, so I mean, I think every I think every kind of youth football player as a kid has a dream about playing professional football. I remember when I was first kind of getting interested in football as a sport, my favorite team was the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm from Canada, obviously I'm from Toronto, but I kind of just chose a team at random. And at the time, I think it was because it was Adrian Peterson that kind of got me interested in it. Actually, I liked him as a player, so I chose them. Um, and maybe Jared Allen too. But so I kind of that's kind of how I got into the sport through the idea of the pros. But as a kid, I kind of was always thinking about college football. Where being like I said in Canada, the most interesting thing to me was like playing at Ohio State or Michigan, and I kind of centered myself around you know like playing big time college football, right? So the pros in my head for a long time actually kind of took a back seat to I wanted to be on the stage. I became a huge of college football, and I became a huge fan of that. So by the time I ended up kind of thinking about the pros again, was actually in college. It was kind of late in my career at Holy Cross, and obviously I've been very serious about my position and what I play for a long time. But I was kind of you know becoming more serious about my future with my position, and then I started to get some interest from various different agents, and then that the summer before my senior year, and then that's kind of where my interest peaked in terms of playing professional football again. So like I said, I think every kid is interested in playing pro football, but for me, kind of the appeal growing up was always playing like big time college football, playing at like Ohio State and stuff. And then here we are, you take it one step at a time, and it led me to a good spot. So
What was that experience like? Obviously, as you said, growing up in Canada, coming to the US, what was that experience like getting to play at Holy Cross collegiately?
right. So I actually began my career playing in the US in high school. I played a year of public high school in Canada, and then I actually got the opportunity to go to a small school that played high schools in Ohio. Every weekend we traveled down on a bus and we played these big teams. And then from there, I ended up going to a prep school for 3 years in Connecticut. And then at the time, I was really kind of like focusing my recruiting process on academics. So I was looking at Ivy League schools, like the Princetons and the Dartmouths and the Patriot League schools. And then eventually I ended up at Holy Cross, which was the best possible place for me. And like we said at Holy Cross, it's like we consider it the greatest place in the world to play college football. And I hold that near and dear to my heart. So by the time I did get to Holy Cross, I had been playing in the United States for a while. Um, but um, playing for Holy Cross in and of itself was something really special. When I first went on my recruiting visit there, so basically the way recruiting in football works is your junior year, going the summer of your junior year, going into your senior year, you go around and you do all these college camps, right? So you travel around. I think I did 13 college camps my junior year, and it was this whole big road trip that me and my dad did. And Holy Cross wasn't even one of the camps that I did. So I went for my official visit to Holy Cross, and it was my first impression of the campus and the program and the coaches. And I knew immediately just talking to my head coach, Coach Bob Chesney, who's really well known in FCS college football and in FBS as well, because he's an incredible coach, and my special teams coordinator. There was just this alignment, basically, between the athletic department and the coaches and the players, and they're really building a culture there that was something really special. And in my time there, we ended up becoming, we went to the playoffs multiple times. We set multiple records for wins and home playoff wins. My senior year, we went undefeated in the regular season. We won 4 Patriot League titles. So it was just this really, really fulfilling and rewarding experience. But the thing was, I knew it immediately from when I went to campus, and that's kind of how I decided to go there. And at Holy Cross is where I believe, from youth football to high school to college, it's where I developed most as a football player. So playing football there was really, incredibly rewarding, and we did really well, and it's a kind of like a priceless time in my life for sure.
Of course, what was that experience like for you to get to represent Holy Cross and putting on that purple uniform for them?
That's an interesting question, actually, because I don't think I realized the answer to that until my senior year. And if not my senior year, definitely my last few games of my senior year. Because when you're playing all these games and you're so wrapped up in a college football season, you rarely, take a time to sit back and kind of reflect at where you are in your career, or like what everything kind of means to you. You're kind of just focused on what things mean to you on a week to week basis, right? And I think it was my senior year where I was sitting before a game, and I was looking at my jersey on my pads before a game, and I saw Holy Cross written on the jersey. And at the time, I'd been there for 4 years, right? So not only the football program, but the school itself, the community, all my friends that weren't football players, all the professors and everything that was Holy Cross. I kind of like saw that in the name on the jersey for the first time. You kind of understand what I mean? Like, so then when I went out onto the field and I was seeing all these, Holy Cross jerseys, it kind of connected the dot between the community and the game for me for the first time. But that's something I realized kind of really late. So after having that realization, my answer is a lot different to that question. Before it was like, oh yeah, it's cool because it's like a Division I school, and we're a high level football team. But at the end of my career, the answer to that question is really, it's very, very meaningful to be able to represent that community and all those people that I admired so much, and the community I admired so much. And especially on away trips, like we go to Yale, or we go, we beat Buffalo, first game of my senior year, and to have that on your jersey, you're kind of carrying that community with you, and that's something that's super meaningful to me. So,
Of course, as you talked about, obviously playing Yale, what is that like, obviously, as a collegiate athlete and playing those private schools and those high-end schools like Yale, Princeton, Harvard?
so sorry, what's your question? So what's it like?
What was that experience like, getting to play those
Oh,
private schools that are
sure.
very popular like Yale and Harvard?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the coolest thing about playing these teams is the tradition. My one of my favorite games from my senior year was playing Harvard, because we went to Harvard, and it was this, gloomy day in Harvard Stadium, and there was overcast, and it was kind of rainy. Um, and it felt super, historic. It like being in the stadium, and the locker rooms are super old, and um, you kind of get that experience with every team that you play in the Patriot League and in the Ivy League. Like the Ivy League teams are known as some of the oldest teams in college football. So you, I guess it's very competitive, and the teams are very well coached up, and you develop a lot as a player, and it's very intense. But at the same time, I think the experience from playing Harvard and Yale, and Georgetown and all the other teams in the Patriot League is really the history and the tradition behind it.
Of course, what were some of your biggest accomplishments as a football player?
I think some of my biggest accomplishments are definitely tied to the teams that I've played on, for sure. I think, like I said, at Holy Cross, we were really successful. Being part of a team that is setting records, like that undefeated season we had, my senior year is definitely, that's definitely the most fulfilling part of being a football player is that. So I think my greatest accomplishments as a football player are definitely, because I'm still just a rookie in the CFL. So I've played a lot of games here, but I haven't finished a full season yet. So up till now, I'd say definitely, the Patriot League titles that I won in college, the conference titles, the playoff games that we won in college, the undefeated season that we had. And then personally, I think also, when I was drafted into the CFL, that was a really, really big moment for me. My girlfriend was there, my friends were there. It was this great moment. I got the call from Coach Donovan, who's the special teams coordinator here. I think personally that was probably the biggest. But in terms of, yeah, I think it's like that and Holy Cross. It's kind of hard to decide.
How was that experience like for you to get to compete in the CFL Invitational Tournament?
Yeah, the combine. That was really interesting. It was a weekend that I came back up here. So I say to a lot of people I'm from Toronto, but I'm actually from 45 minutes outside of Toronto. And the combine was held in the town next over from my hometown. So I woke up that morning before the combine, in my childhood bedroom, because I've lived away from home for like 8 years now, right? Because I did high school and college in the U.S. And before the combine, I woke up in my childhood bedroom and got up and drove to the combine in the next town over. And it was kind of nerve wracking. Obviously, it was kind of like my first taste of you know um, competing for a job, right? And being on this stage and performing in front of coaches in person. There was also a whole element of it where I was talking to teams in person and doing interviews. And I did an interview with my hometown newspaper. So it was this combination of like this full circle moment, right, where I was back home, and then also, like my first kind of taste of competing in pro football. The combine itself for me was, obviously it's like a grueling day. There's a full host of field testing sessions, and then you get your bench press and your vertical jump in. And then the difference between the CFL combine and the NFL combine is that there's a like a padded kind of skelly, so like wide receivers, DBs, quarterbacks, and then offensive linemen, and then inside run period. So it's like there's almost like a practice element to it too, where you wear your helmet and your pads, and then I was snapping in my helmet and my pads, and that obviously adds a whole another element of, it's a long day, right? So at the end of the day, you're exhausted and everything, but it was great. I couldn't have worked out better being where it was and how it went for me, for sure.
Of course, as you talked about, similar to the NFL, what was that experience like for you going through that CFL combine, knowing that some of these combines are just like the NFL one that those collegiate athletes enter in?
So what was the CFL, what was the actual combine like for me?
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's interesting because it's something that you train for a long time. So physically, I definitely felt prepared for it. I felt confident, obviously, like the whole thing for me being a long snapper, my whole um padded practice element to it was just me snapping and taking block steps, and them giving me kind of like various looks and doing field goal snaps and stuff like that. And for me, that's like a regular session for me. That's kind of just like a regular day out on the turf. So physically for me, it was kind of just another day in the office in terms of snapping. But when you get to the testing and everything, it's a whole nother element where, you've run a 40 probably countless times working up to the combine, and you've benched countless times working up to the combine, and everything like that. But there's a difference when you're standing on the front, you're standing at the beginning of the 40-yard dash, and you look along the 40-yard dash, and there's just coaches just lining the 40-yard dash. It becomes something completely, something that you can't really prepare for. You can't really prepare for that pressure. So it would, like, if I had a short answer for that, it was just there was a lot of pressure in some elements of it. For me, the part where I was just snapping felt very, smooth and controlled, because it was something that I'd done, obviously every day. And so it was a whole lot of mixed emotions, but definitely a lot of pressure.
Of course, at the CFL Combine, what was that experience like, getting to be interviewed and having questions asked in front of the head coaches at the time to see?
Yeah, it's funny because, when a lot of the athletes that go to the CFL Combine are really well-known athletes, right? They come out of college, and they were stars in college, or they were they won conference awards, and they've been been asked a lot of questions over their careers. Like I said before, I'm a long snapper, right? And kind of the way that people think about long snappers is this: if things go well for you, no one's gonna know who you are. If things go poorly for you, and if someone knows who you are, then things have gone bad, right? So over the course of my college career, especially, I didn't start every year at Holy Cross. It was definitely, I had to earn my stripes at Holy Cross in the scheme that we played and what they demanded from my position. I wasn't asked I was never really interviewed, right? So I think for a lot of guys, you sit down in front of a assistant GM or a GM, and they're like kind of shaking in their boots. They're, like, how do I get every word right? For me, I was like, ask away. I get to talk to you, and you were curious about, like, what I do as a player and my philosophy and everything. I'm like, oh, this is great. You know what I mean? So, it was a little spotlight for me. So I loved it. I loved every second of it.
What was that experience like for you, going through the CFL draft and getting your name called that you would become a Toronto Argonauts?
It was really special. It was really special. I think, if you're not familiar with the CFL, or you're not from Canada, then it's kind of hard to understand um, how the CFL is ingrained in Canadian culture, and especially Canadian football culture. So, growing up just outside of Toronto, I remember there was a lot of times where in youth football we go play at, like, at the time it was Ivor Wynn, now it's Tim Hortons Stadium, where the Hamilton Tiger Cats played. Or, we go to the Rogers Center where the Argonauts used to play, and watch the Argos game. And it was this huge, deal. And especially, like I said, I'm from just outside of Toronto. I grew up watching the Argos play, right? So there's this surreal moment where you kind of really don't understand, like, what being drafted means, or how it's gonna play out for you in the future. You start thinking about the logistics, getting to training camp. I was in a different country. I was in the U.S., so getting back to Canada is a whole thing that you start to think about. There's a surreal moment like that, but there's also for me, being drafted to the team that I was drafted to, and being from where I'm from. There was this. It was just a really rewarding moment. So there's another layer to it too, where the old long snapper, the former long snapper for the Toronto Argonauts, Jake Reinhardt, he was here for a long time. He had a long career for the Argos. When I was growing up and I was learning how to long snap, and I was still playing youth football, minor football, in my hometown, I would go out to camps that were held locally, and he often was there teaching or instructing long snapping. So he was kind of my mentor growing up. And whenever I come home, I'd reach out to him, hey, do you want to train? Do you want to get a session in, or whatever? And never at any point as a kid did I think that I would be able to, like, kind of step into those shoes for him specifically. the guy that kind of introduced me in a way to long snapping. So there was this whole full circle moment, very rewarding. Obviously, like the whole Jake Reinhardt thing, me being from Toronto, it was super special, very special.
Of course, you being from Toronto, what was that feeling like after you got that call that you were gonna be coming back home to Toronto to be playing your professional football career?
Yeah, like I said, it worked out perfectly. I I've talked with my family and the people closest to me, and we really can't think of a better spot or a better way that it worked out. It was just, like I said, I'm half an hour from home in either direction, and Toronto's is a great organization, and it didn't work out. Couldn't have worked out better.
What was that feeling like the first time you got to put on your professional football jersey and representing the CFL and Toronto Argonauts?
What's funny is actually the biggest moment of realization for me wasn't even, I think, the first time I put the Argos jersey on. So remember earlier when I was talking about how at the CFL Combine, there's a part of the combine where you actually put on the pads and the helmet. So in the combine, they give you practice jerseys, and I remember I put my practice jersey on my pads, and there was the CFL emblem on the practice jersey, and I was like, this is insane. I sent a picture to my mom and my dad and my girlfriend, and I was I was that was kind of like the crazy moment for me. It was actually at the combine having the CFL thing on my jersey. So when I finally we suited up for our first preseason game in Hamilton for the Argos, it was you know it was really special, but kind of in those moments you're really thinking about your responsibilities on the field. Like I said at Holy Cross, like you're so wrapped up in the day-to-day, week-to-week kind of responsibilities that you have and objectives that you have that, by the time we got to our first preseason game, is very much, that's kind of where your mind is at. But I think after the games, when your family's there and your friends are there, it's, that's kind of when you have like oh, wow, I just played my first professional football game. You have those moments of realization, but definitely at the combine is actually where it happened to me first, for a short answer, funnily enough.
Of course, what was that feeling like getting to put on that powder blue in your first home football game as a professional athlete?
Right, so our first home game was against Hamilton at BMO, and growing up when I was watching, actually, that's not necessarily true. I was going to say growing up, I watched all the Argos games at the Rogers Center, but I actually had watched a few. I came to a few Argos games with my dad in prior years. It's just, there's just nothing like it. When, like, the pre-game, locker room, you're in the place that you practice every day. The same locker room that you practice in every day, and or you go to every day, and you're around. Uh, your teammates, but there's this different kind of feeling to it. And it's like you go out, you walk down the tunnel, and all the fans are there, and you're high-fiving fans, and you're waiting outside the tunnel, and the fireworks are going, and um it's there's really nothing better. And every time that it happens, I really have to pinch myself to realize that, like, I do this as a living. Like, I'm privileged enough to have this be my job. So it was my first home game at BMO was I mean, every game at BMO is a blast. But that first one was just like I was pinching myself.
What are some of the similarities and differences between playing in the CFL, XFL, and then, of course, the NFL?
Right. So the CFL is a professional football league in Canada. There are 9 teams from BC to Vancouver, BC to Montreal, Quebec. There's a huge fan base here, a lot of supporters. So it's similar in terms of the other leagues, in terms of, like, It's similar in terms of obviously there's more attention to the NFL, but there's just as much passion for per individual fan, I would say. There is differences in terms. There's a pretty big difference in terms of the game, right? So we play Canadian football rules. So in terms of the field's different. So the field is, instead of being 100 yards long, it's 100 meters long, which roughly equates to 110 yards, right? So you'll go like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then there's a 55, which is the center line, and then another 50, and then it goes back down. There's the field is wider. The end zones are 20 yards deep instead of 10 yards deep. The field goal posts are at the front of the end zone. I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of differences. There's 12 men on the field instead of 11. There's 3 downs instead of 4 downs, even though you still need 10 yards to get a first down. So there's all these structural differences. There's differences in the special teams rules, differences in offensive rules in terms of how players can move. And if you ask, any individual on the street, they might say, oh, it makes the game more exciting, our rules, because there's more passing, special teams plays a bigger part in the game. Or, some people prefer like the more, the smaller, fast-paced American football style, which I played for a long time. So the main difference I would say in the CFL is really just like is the rules. It's Canadian football. But yeah, that's kind of like the main difference.
As a player and playing in American football versus now playing professionally in CFL football, what has that adjustment been like for you?
Yeah, so there's a couple. First of all, as a long snapper, as a specialist, I play a lot more. So, in American football, you might punt maybe 4 times a game. If you punt 5 or 6 times, that would be a lot of punts for a game. So I was on the field maybe 4 times in college, and now we'll have games where we're punting like 8 to 10 times, right? And obviously, I'm doing field goals and PATs, and the scores in the CFL can really get up there. So you're on the field a lot for PATs, or that's like the extra point right after you kick after you score a touchdown. So there's a lot more involvement of specialists in the game. Special teams plays a much bigger part of the game. Personally, for me, being a long snapper, there isn't huge adjustments. If you're a wide receiver and you play American football and then you come to Canada, there's a big difference, right? Because in the US football, you're not allowed forward motion towards the line. And then all of a sudden you're in American, you come up here and then there's wide receivers, crisscrossing, going straight and cutting in pre-snap, and there's all these different rules. For me, it's really, other than, a few small technicalities and differences in terms of how people can line up in front of you, it's really kind of just contained in similar to what I was doing in college football. It's very much like my own world when I go out there. So,
What does a typical game day look like for you as an Argonauts player?
yeah, so I mean, it depends whether we're home or we're away. When we're home, and it's like usually like a 7 o'clock game, 7:30 p.m. I'll wake up obviously in my apartment. I get to have my own routine. Usually I'll eat and then I'll stretch out in my room, just relax. If it's a late game, you try not to do pretty much anything throughout the day, right? So I like to wake up a little bit earlier and then maybe take a nap in the afternoon or something, or just relax in the afternoon before the game. And then I go into the facility a lot earlier than most players because specialists go out onto the field earlier for warm up than all the other position groups. So for me, I'll get to the facility for a 7 o'clock game, maybe around 2:30 or 3. I'll do like activation stuff. I'll stretch. Sometimes I get shoulder issues, so I'll do like shoulder activation. I'll get a pregame meal, and then that's kind of when the on-field stuff kind of starts. So I'll go out. I'll stretch. I'll throw the ball with one of our trainers or equipment people just to get the ball in my hands and feel it out. And then I have this whole routine for my stretch. And then I'll usually get some snaps in before I put my pads on and everything, just to get into the feel of it and, take in the atmosphere. And then you kind of go back into the locker room, and you're there for a little bit, put everything on, and then you're up for warm up. So for home games, it's like that. And for away games, it's similar. You're kind of just it's more dictated by what the team schedule says, So if it's like, hey, we're going to the field at X time, then you go to the field at that time, and then everything starts from there. So, yeah, I would say that's pretty standard for most players too. Yeah.
What was that feeling like for you to take that first snap in your first professional football career in your first game?
I always tell like the people that it's funny because like you just asked that last question, which was like how do I prepare? I actually don't eat a lot before games, and it's because in every game before my first snap, I'm really not hungry, right? I'm kind of feel sick. I'm kind of anxious. It's good nerves, right? Because you're alert. By the time I take my first snap in any game, I go back to the field, and the first thing I think of is I'm starving. I'm so hungry, and it's because those nerves have gone down, right? So it's every time that's what it is. And I think in my first game it was like that as well, where obviously like you're looking at the other team and you've done your scouting report and you've done your film. You're kind of trying to find the guys, and obviously playing pro football, the guys are a lot bigger than in college, and there's you kind of have this fear as to like whether you being out there is like where you should be, right? Like whether you're going to fit in. And my first professional snap in preseason was in Hamilton. I remember snapping, everything kind of just goes, really quickly. You kind of like forget, it turns into muscle memory, and you do your thing. And then I remember when I got off to the sideline, I was kind of elated because I thought, I was like, wow, that went really well. Like I snapped, I got off the ball, and it was really relieving, because I was like, okay, yeah, I could do this. Like I could play at this level, and I was also very hungry too. So
What does it mean to you to be a CFL player and represent the Argonauts?
it's definitely a fulfillment of a dream that I had as a kid. Like I was saying before, um, I think the answer to that question, like it was in college football. I might only know the answer to that question at the end of my career. The full breadth of the answer to that question. So right now it's meaningful because of like where I'm from, and the team that I'm playing for. I realize the importance and the gravity of that, but I'm still kind of learning the answer to that as we go.
How does that feel to represent the country that you're from?
That I think you were talking about um, like game days and stuff, and I feel like some of the most special moments I have on game days are the national anthem, like the Canadian national anthem, because having played most of my career in the U.S., you're constantly pregame, you're hearing the American national anthem, like the Stars and the Stripes and everything, which has a special place in my heart too. But I think for me, coming back here, the first time I heard the anthem, that's something that means a lot to me. So it means a lot, yeah, and it's reflected every day when I get to hear the anthem pregame.
Who are some of the players that you look up to in the football community?
Well, it's funny. My position is actually a pretty small community, right? So if you go to any like long snapping camp, or you meet another long snapper, you kind of like understand who they are and where they're coming from. And there's this kind of shared bond between like members of like that position. So I think in terms of what I look up to in the sport, growing up in long snapping, I started being introduced to a lot of like professional long snappers. We keep in contact, like um, when I first went to Holy Cross, a kicking coach reached out to me, and he introduced me to Zach Trinner, who's the long snapper for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And me and Zach had a connection because he played under my current head coach when my coach was coaching in Division II at a school called Assumption. And Zach played at Assumption. So, he over, my college career was someone that I was always reaching out to. Like during COVID, I was snapping every day and I was trying to improve so that next season I could go in and make an impact, be an impact player. And he was always there to, watch my film and, when I had a bad day, he kind of remind me that, it's all game basically, and, you know, he would stop me from getting too hard on myself. And even now when we're together, we'll experiment with different things. He'll tell me what he's working on. I'll tell him what I'm working on. So Zach Trinner for sure. Jake Reinhardt, who's the former long snapper in Toronto, he was someone that I looked up to a lot. And then there are guys that I've never met that I just watched their film in my position being a long snapper that I just think that they're incredible at what they do, and I try to emulate them, like Joe Cardona of the Patriots, the New England Patriots, J.J. Jansen, Carolina Panthers, these are or Luke Rhodes, Indianapolis Colts. These are all guys that I watch on film all the time, so I have a whole host of long snappers that I look up to for various reasons.
Of course, what is that like, obviously, implementing your game after these former long snappers that played in the NFL, like Greg Warner?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
What is it like, obviously, implementing your game after those former NFL long snappers like Greg Warner, who has played in the NFL?
Right. It's like no two people snap the ball the same, right? Long snapping is a position that changes with every person because every person has a different body type, right? So the pitfall I think that a lot of young long snappers or a lot of people in my position face is that they see guys in how they're snapping, um, and then they try to directly snap like that person. And that was actually the thing with me and Zach Trinner was he was sending me film of him practicing, and I loved like how fast he was getting out of his stance or the accuracy of his snap and everything. And I would go out and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna snap like Zach, or I'll snap like Joe Cardona, who has a completely different way of snapping than Zach, and Luke Rhodes has a completely different way of snapping than Joe Cardona, and um, the thing is, it's not going to work, right? Because you have a completely different frame, different body. Your strengths in snapping lie in different places. So really, when I'm looking at guys and I'm trying to emulate their game, it's not necessarily that I'm trying to like be a carbon copy of anyone. It's more so, oh, I like this little thing that this person does, and then you kind of experiment with how you snap and you figure out what's the best way to incorporate that into your own game based off of how you snap, right? So I'm trying to think of an analogy from another sport, and maybe it's like pitching, right? Long snapping is a specialist position. So if there's an analogy in another sport, be like a relief pitcher. It's not someone that like plays every snap of the game. They come in at specific times of the game, or like a face-off get-off guy in cross. They're but no two people. If I had to guess, I don't know pretty much anything about baseball. I'm sure, like based off of body mechanics, there isn't really no two pitchers who throw the ball the same. Everyone has different body mechanics, so it's like that. You need to really experiment with emulating guys and not fall into the trap of trying to be exactly like them because, like I said, everyone's different.
What is that experience like getting to play with some of your teammates like Chad Kelly and Andrew Cameron Duck?
Right. I think the answer to that is when I was before I became before I went pro, I would ask a lot of guys who were playing professional football what kind of like team dynamics were like. Because in college football, there's this element to playing college football where you're playing for something, like no one's being paid. You're playing for like the school. You're playing for like like the deeper like love of the game, which everyone at this level still is, by the way. But it's I think it's more apparent in college football. So I was asking people around, what are team dynamics like, blah blah blah. And a lot of the answers to that question were like, well, it's going to be different than college. There isn't going to be, everyone is kind of like they're working, yada yada yada. And when I got to Toronto, that was proven completely wrong, right? The locker room culture, the guys, the players in Toronto are, just great people. They're great at what they do, but they're also really great people. So, if you walk into the locker room on any given day, you want to ask someone a question about what they do or how they do it. There's going to be a guy like Mwamba there, or Chad Kelly there, or Flo, um, or just like all these guys that are so experienced and so well versed at what they do, but they're also just great people. So it's a huge, huge resource to be on a team that has that. And I think that's ultimately like the reason that we are as successful as we are, is everyone is very invested in each other. And culture, the culture is very well established here. I mean, Pinball Clemens, our GM, I think it's really obvious when you look at him and you look at his approach to football and just life in general, that kind of trickles down into the team. So um, it's, I guess the answer to that is all those players that you just listed are huge resources, but also friends. Just good people.
Who are some of the influential people in your career that have shaped you into the long snapper you are today?
Um, I've played for a long time, and I've interacted with a lot of people, a lot of coaches, a lot of players. But I would say definitely my coaches at Holy Cross. I would say my special teams coordinator, Drew Kanan, and my head coach, Bob Chesney, definitely made me kind of circumstantially into the player that I am today. We played at Holy Cross a really difficult scheme, right? And it asked a lot of the long snapper um, in terms of protection, in terms of involvement, in the scheme. When I went to Holy Cross, I needed to learn to snap in a completely different way, and it took me a long time to learn. But the coaches there had a lot of faith in me, and what they were asking from me that was difficult would ultimately kind of like change me and mold me into the long snapper that was able to go and play professional football, right? Because when you're in a scheme as not all long snappers in college football block, right? So that's basically kind of the gist of it. A lot of schemes in college football, long snapper is kind of like a snap and run down field kind of guy. And there's no scheme in professional football where the long snapper is told to not block, right? And somewhere or another, there's a lot of different schemes, a lot of different protections that long snapper is involved in the blocking scheme, because you want to be able to put fast guys on the field that don't block. You want to put those guys on the field so they can run down field and make a tackle, right? So you want the long snapper to be involved in that. Holy Cross, that's what it was. So I'm super thankful that I was able to be a part of that program, and I'm thankful for them for sticking with me as I was able to learn and develop into the player I am now, for sure.
What is that feeling like, obviously getting to meet your fans and having them ask for your autographs and photos with you?
Um, it's weird. It's definitely an adjustment. Um, but I think the one saving grace, like the way that I think about it is, I was, like when you're running back to the locker room after a win, and there's like kids like, hey, can I have your wristband, or can I have your towel? Can I sign this thing for you? I was that kid. You know what I mean? Like I remember when I played for my provincial team, my provincial football team, Team Ontario in Montreal for a tournament one time. We went to a Montreal Alouettes game, and I remember where it's funny enough, we actually just played in Montreal. So I was at the Alouettes game, and I remember as they were walking back to their locker room, I was over the guardrail, like, hey, trying to get players. Yeah, can I have your gloves? Can I have your wristbands? Can I have your towel? So it's weird, but I understand that the impact that you can have on a kid that that is just wants to talk to you for a little bit, or that's something that I'm coming to realize, and it's rewarding in that way, for sure.
What is that like, obviously, getting to see those fans represent you and wearing your jersey and wearing the Toronto Argonauts jersey?
The only people that are wearing my jersey right now are my girlfriend and my family. So there's not a lot of pressure. I'm never really looking up into the stadium or into the audience, and there's a bunch of 47s, unless it's my family. So, but for in terms of the Argonauts jersey, just like the general, you walk around the city, you see the double blue, and I was having a pregame meal once when it was a home game just down the street, and there was people walking around with their Argos jerseys, um, and someone asked me, I was like, what's it like, like having people like supporting your team and stuff like that, and I just felt, it like felt like it was just like kind of like felt like home. You know what I mean? Like, we walk, so we don't practice in the stadium. We have practice a little bit further away from the stadium, and sometimes we'll walk there, and you have people that will stop you in the street. Oh, go Argos! Oh, is that your last game? Oh, yeah. It kind of, like seeing the jerseys and having that support around the city, like just makes you feel. It gives you confidence and makes you feel like, oh, like we're, the team. There's a lot of support and acceptance for the team, and it feels like very like a home. When you have a home game, it feels like a home game. You know.
What are some of your favorite memories representing the Argonauts?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think so far they're just games, like games so far that I've played in my CFL career that were just hard fought and well earned wins. Um, like I'm thinking about just this last just this last game in Montreal was a really hard fought win for us. In this game we secured the Eastern final game at home. My kicker Boris Beatty, he hit a 1,000 point career mark, 1,000 points in his career mark that game in Montreal, and I think those are the moments where it's special, where I know that it's a game that in a moment where I'll look back and I'll be like, wow, I was just really, in the locker room after that game, it's just like, wow, I'm like really proud to be part of this team. It's like really fulfilling to be able to be the one who snaps the ball to Boris when he has that kind of like landmark moment in his career. And so definitely like those games and those moments, like those specific snaps, you know.
What advice would you give those future college football players that are looking to play in college football?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I tell myself. It's you know, the right school for you isn't the right school for everyone else, right? When you are recruiting in football is a really weird, is a really weird process, because you're like the 17-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old, whatever kid, and for the first time in your life, you're kind of like told to brand yourself, have a personal brand, and market yourself, and you're talking to coaches, and they have an agenda, and you have your own personal agenda and your own goals, and it could be really devastating for some players when they want to go to a certain school, um, for whatever reason it doesn't work out. I think for young football players that are looking to play college football, the best school for you is the school that wants you to be there, right? That has a plan for you, and sees the value in you. And that school isn't always going to be like the Tennessees. It's not always going to be, for Canadians, that school might be a Canadian college, might be University of Toronto. And ultimately, those schools that want you there and have a plan for you, and value you as a player are going to turn you, like hands down, better into a better football player than, a school that, you may have wanted to go to for various reasons, but it's just not the right fit for you. So everything to myself in the past, everything will work out. no matter what. And just enjoy the process, because it's a fun process regardless.
What advice would you give those NCAA college football players that are going through that process of deciding whether to go to the NFL, the CFL, XFL, or even USFL?
Yeah. Well, having that opportunity is a huge privilege. And anyone that's playing college football, that has that opportunity is going to understand the gravity, um, and the opportunity in front of them. I don't have a lot to say, besides, just my own experience at this time. I'm still a relatively young player. Have 3/4 of a season under my belt. So in terms of adjusting to professional football, I'm kind of still in their shoes, right? Um, but um, in terms of the combine process and the getting your film out there process, and talking to coaches, I would say the biggest thing, and this is really for, I think, for all players at all levels, including myself now, is listen to the people around you. If you have a strength coach and they're trying to get you ready for the combine, listen to your strength coach. If you have an agent and they tell you to do something, just listen to your agent. Do what your agent says. If you're a youth football player and your coach tells you something, I think my best quality as a football player is I've always showed up, and I've always just listened to what people told me, and I've done that.
What advice would you give those rookies like yourself that are going through the CFL process?
I'm kind of looking for that advice too. You know what I mean? like like I said, I'm still a young player. I don't have a lot of advice for other rookies, because I'm still in my rookie year. I think maybe we'll do another one of these next year, and then when I'm at this point in my second season, my second contract year next year, I'll have an answer for that. We can do that. How about that?
Where can my listeners find y'all at on social media?
Yeah. So my Instagram handles my first name and my last name, Adam Guillemette. Um, I don't use, Twitter much, but my handle on that's I am Adam 40. And then I am Adam 40. And then obviously on all the Argos pages, I'll be on there every once in a while. So pretty much just Insta. In terms of social media, I'm pretty much using Instagram.
Thank you again, Adam Guillemette, for your interview, and best luck in your future as a Toronto Argonauts.
Thank you so much.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Adam, for your interview, and best luck in your future.
Thanks, Brandon.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.